It was an ordinary day. Peppa saw a new game on Daddy Pig's computer called Coin Collection. She started collecting coins, and everything seemed fun and harmless. At first, Peppa enjoyed the game, but day by day, she became more absorbed and lost track of time. Soon, dark circles appeared under her eyes, and the joy disappeared. One sunny day, Mommy Pig was tidying up toys in the nursery. She hadn't seen Peppa for a while and decided to check on her. Pig entered the room to turn off the computer, but what she saw shocked her. Peppa was sitting in her chair with wires connected to her head.
Mom, I'm almost at the final level!
Peppa exclaimed, her eyes clouded. Mommy Pig rushed to disconnect the wires, but as soon as she reached for them, Peppa raised her hand. Another wire appeared out of nowhere and plunged into Mommy Pig's neck. Soon she found herself next to Peppa, absorbed in the screen. Meanwhile, George and Daddy Pig were watching a show about Mr. Potato in the living room. George asked where Peppa was. Daddy Pig shrugged. George decided to check what was happening in the room. He entered and saw Peppa and Mama connected to the computer. He stood there, overwhelmed with fear, but before he could do anything, a wire shot into his neck as well. He too fell under the influence of the game. Daddy Pig also grew bored, sitting alone in the room, so he went to call the family for an evening movie. He entered the room and saw that everyone was now playing. Deciding to stop this madness, he turned off the computer. However, the screen still flickered on. Suddenly, a wire shot forward and connected to Daddy Pig's neck. He froze. His eyes clouded over, and he too succumbed to the game. Suddenly, the lights went out. Now the entire family sat on the sofa in the living room with empty eyes. Wires protruded from their necks. The TV flickered ominously, showing a terrible grimace.
They stepped out into the rain. But this rain was different. The world around them was empty. A street lamp hummed faintly. Each drop carried darkness within it. A black puddle, like ink, spilled into reality. George leaned over the puddle. Emily grabbed his shoulder, stopping him.
Step back.
It seemed the puddle was fading. A false alarm, but in its reflection atop the raindrops, a black, hooded figure appeared. The group approached a bench. The rain intensified. The longer they stayed in the rain, the deeper the infection spread. A drop landed on Susie. Her hand turned blurry, translucent. Emily screamed, pulling it away. They vanished. Peppa noticed bubbles rising in the old well. Evie began to cry softly. Black liquid dripped from the corner of her mouth. She reached toward the well. Even the little one understood. Something was hiding there. From the puddles lining the path, tendrils slithered out, surrounding Susie and Emily. The darkness didn't just take, it held on. Peppa ran, shielding Evie with an umbrella. Emily broke free, but stumbled. Tendril grabbed her. Her scream echoed everywhere. In the glow of the street lamp stood the Dripper, massive, black droplets trailing down his cloak. He was the soul of this rain, he whispered. Peppa, holding Evie in her arms, approached him, the umbrella raised like a shield. The final question, is it worth fighting, escape, or become the rain? Evie smiled.
Peppa and George spent the weekend at the country house. While their parents relaxed at home, they played in the garden.
George, let's go look for treasure.
They got carried away and dug too deep. Suddenly, they fell into some underground space. It resembled an underworld. Everything around exuded horror. Peppa and George walked along a dark corridor and emerged into a huge ritual hall. The room was lit by a red glow. Walls were draped with chains, bones and skeletons lay scattered around, and in the center stood a table.
George, look! This must be a sacrificial altar!
Peppa, I think we should leave.
George muttered nervously.
Yes, right now!
Peppa said as if she had an idea, but George was already pulling her by the hand toward the exit. Suddenly, they realized they couldn't escape on their own.
Are we stuck here forever?
Don't cry, we'll figure something out.
Peppa said, and started calling for help. Their cries brought their parents running. They were furious, but helped the piglets get out. On the way home, Peppa enthusiastically told them about the ritual hall. Her excitement frightened George. Their parents just exchanged glances and laughed. That night, Peppa said,
George, I have something special.
She pulled a small bone from under her pillow. It was glowing with a bright green light.
Peppa, you're going to get into trouble.
George warned anxiously, but Peppa didn't listen and happily played with her find. Suddenly, the floor in the nursery cracked open into 2 parts, and from it emerged a gigantic skeleton with red eyes, a terrible smile, black claws, and red tentacles behind its back.
You stole my bone. You will pay for this,
It said in a demonic voice. The skeleton grabbed Peppa's hand and lifted her toward the ceiling. Meanwhile, Dad and Mom Pig were sitting in the living room reading books. Suddenly, Evie ran into the room.
Bear! Where is my bear, Mommy?
Honey, he's probably lost again among your toys. Let's go find him.
Mommy Pig picked up Evie in her arms, and they headed to her room. When they opened the door, they froze in horror. Everything in the room was upside down. Walls were scratched with claws, and in the middle of the room hung Bear on a rope with black crosses instead of eyes.
My bear!
Sweetheart, it's just some evil joke.
Mom said nervously. Suddenly, they heard wild screams from Peppa's and George's nursery. The room was in chaos. George was hanging in a net in the upper corner of the room with white eyes as if hypnotized. Peppa was standing against the wall with black eyes and a creepy smile. She was whispering some spell and scratching something on the wall with a bone. Dad Pig was lying on the floor and barely managed to say, "Run!" In the center stood an ominous skeleton. It turned toward the door and whispered in that same chilling demonic voice.
Oh, we have guests. You're just in time. I just finished with these little pigs.
It was an ordinary day. Peppa's math teacher, Madame Gazelle, started coming to her house. At first, Peppa enjoyed studying with her. However, after a few days, Peppa became thin and sad. Her parents started to worry.
Peppa, you must eat.
Mama Pig insisted, but Peppa didn't want anything except math.
Please, call Madame Gazelle.
Her parents obeyed their daughter's request. Peppa looked worse and worse. Madame Gazelle sat with her in the room and taught her mathematics. Suddenly, she pulled out a pink stone. Peppa's pupils disappeared, and she floated up as if hypnotized.
Math is your life, Peppa,
said Madame Gazelle with a sinister smile. Meanwhile, her parents had no idea what was happening. They were sitting in the living room watching TV.
What an interesting movie,
said Daddy Pig. A few days later, Peppa could no longer walk or talk.
Why isn't she getting better?
Mama Pig asked, wiping tears from her eyes. One day, Mama Pig saw Madame Gazelle smiling menacingly and holding a stone over Peppa.
What is going on here?
Shouted Mama Pig.
Get out of here, Madame Gazelle,
said Daddy Pig, looking at her with suspicion. The room darkened. Madame Gazelle transformed into a terrible monster that only said one thing.
Math will take over the world. Bow to it.
A cold wind blew. Everything around turned into a tornado of notebooks and numbers. In the morning, everyone sat at the table with crazy faces. They were solving problems while Madame Gazelle loomed over them as if controlling their minds. It was an ordinary evening in the village. Peppa and George decided to look at the stars through a telescope. Suddenly, they noticed a bright dot approaching quickly toward Earth. It turned out to be an unusual spaceship that landed nearby. Out of the ship came strange creatures. Aliens. They were menacing, with sharp teeth, bright eyes without pupils, and long arms with claws. Suddenly, glowing balls flew out of the ship. These were mini aliens circling around. They glowed gloomily and ominously, and their movements were quick and sharp. The aliens approached and whispered something threatening. They wanted to take over the village. Peppa and George were terrified. They couldn't move from fear. One of the creatures extended its long arm toward the piglets and attacked them. Peppa and George tried to escape, but a bright light from the alien ship pulled them upward. At that moment, they thought they would never see Mommy and Daddy again. But suddenly, a strange luminous creature appeared. It directed a beam of light toward Peppa and George. The beam shone brightly and blinded the aliens. They got scared and quickly flew away. Everything became quiet and peaceful again. The starry creature became their new friend, and Peppa realized even the scariest aliens can leave if there is the light of goodness. It all started like any other day. Daddy Pig was fixing a floorboard. Peppa, George, and Evie watched. Evie stared into the gap, silent, unmoving, eyes too wide.
Don't go down there.
Daddy Pig said.
Just dust and spiders.
That night, Peppa woke up. Strange lights flickered under her door. She heard soft rustling. At the end of the hall, she saw Evie.
Peppa, we're waiting.
In the living room, the rug was gone. In its place, a gaping hole. She stepped closer. Creak, crack. A hand grabbed her. She was pulled under the floor, into darkness, cold, whispering, laughter. Then a warped version of Evie's song. Peppa trembled. Evie stood before her, but twisted, taller, eyes hollow.
You came to play.
She whispered. Peppa backed away, touched something. She turned and saw Daddy Pig. His eyes were glowing. She ran. Hands reached out, faces flickered. Ahead was a light. It was the silhouette of Mummy Pig. She climbed toward the light, and suddenly a white flash. She gasped in bed. In her room, she looked around, panting. Everything looked normal. She exhaled, nervously smiled. But then she looked up. Evie was on the ceiling, smiling. Peppa and Susie decided to go to the beach. The clouds were gathering. Waves roared with gloomy thunder, and the wind howled. The girls began building sandcastles. Suddenly, they noticed a dark whirlpool in the water, pulling everything around it. Suddenly, the water monster emerged from the water, sinister with shiny scales and creepy, empty eyes. "I've been waiting for you," he said. "I guard this abyss and take everyone to the bottom. This abyss has swallowed many. It takes those who are not afraid of their fears. If you want to learn its secret, you need to throw something precious to you into this abyss." Susie threw her favorite toy into the whirlpool. The water in the abyss splashed, and terrifying faces of lost souls appeared on the surface. Peppa threw her favorite ball, and at that moment, the whirlpool boiled over, swallowing her soul. "You have become part of me. Now you will stay in this abyss forever." Their souls were pulled into watery silence. When they opened their eyes, they found themselves on the dark seabed. They noticed two red eyes watching them from the darkness. Suddenly, a terrifying sea duck jumped out, sharp-toothed and enormous. Peppa thought it looked familiar. The duck transformed into an even more horrifying silhouette that chased them across the seabed. The girls tried to swim faster, but their strength was fading. Suddenly, they spotted a small cave and quickly hid inside. The duck swam past. They caught their breath, but then light appeared behind them again. This time, two green eyes. With a wild scream, they jumped out of the cave. Behind them emerged a huge sea dragon with sharp teeth, long whiskers, and enormous claws. It wrapped its tentacles around them and dragged them into its cave. No one ever saw them again.